What's up, everybody? Josiah here from EasyCaters.com. Today, I thought I'd do an updated video about how I look for in-play stocks each day, each morning before the market opens and just after it opens. I did a video about scanning for gaps a long time ago that's been viewed thousands of times on YouTube and so forth. And my method has changed a little bit, and I've got a few other tricks up my sleeve that I've been using for a while, and so I wanted to go over some of those, and hopefully those will be interesting to you. My particular methodology, I don't look at news or anything like that. I just go by price action and volume, and so that's you'll find that's really what a lot of traders do that, where they, assume that the market has priced in any news already, so that if there's a gap overnight or something like that, that is compensating for whatever news is happening. And so if that's a significant gap, then maybe it's tradable under certain strategies. Maybe if it's not a significant gap, then, then the news wasn't that, noteworthy, and, it's not something that's really going to be tradable under normal gap trading strategies. But anyway, so just a note on that, I don't look at news or anything like that. I just look at price charts and volume. So my particular approach, I try to build a short list of stocks that I think I might be interested in trading during the day that look like they might have a good opening drive, opening range, strong movement off the open, ones that are going to have some momentum for the day and so forth, that a lot of eyes are going to be on and watching. I want to be in those stocks that everybody else is interested in, so that those tend to move and trend a little bit more more consistently. They're more disciplined because there's a lot more orders coming in and so forth, to keep the stock in a disciplined trend and so forth. So those are the kind that I like. I already trade really liquid stocks anyway. I day trade, so I always, liquidity is pretty important to me. I make sure that there's a tight bid-ask spread, a lot of volume being traded on the day on average. I even take it a step further and look at per minute volume being traded and per minute number of trades happening, so that I know that each 5-minute bar is going to have XYZ number of trades that have happened on average, and XYZ number of shares that have traded on average. So I look for things like that as well. But anyway, so over here on the sidebar, you'll see, so I start out with a blank slate on my focus list, and I just go through my universe of stocks that I made a specific scan that just finds a universe of stocks that are highly liquid, that I think are potentially day tradable for me, and I try to find all my setups from this list. I also have my gap scan list here. That's my gap scans are all available on my website. And this is also scanning from within this list to find gaps. So if you look, we can start at the gaps here. So you can see, so we've got some, let's see, GIS. So we've got a gap up to here currently. So you'll notice on my chart, I've got one 30-minute chart over here with the pre-market activity showing extended hours, and I've got my daily chart over here. So, and I've got my pointer linked up so that when I mouse over an area on the daily chart, it'll show up on the 30-minute chart as well. And you can synchronize those crosshairs right here by checking this box in chart settings, and that will turn on that feature. So what I do is usually, so I can see whether or not on the daily chart we're breaking any levels, I'll look over here and mouse over where the current closing price is in the pre-market, and you'll be able to see where we're gapping to over here on the daily chart. And so you can see that this is kind of a breakout gap. It's breaking out of a little basing area here, and so that looks pretty good. So that's interesting, and I don't like that there's kind of inconsistent volume here in the pre-market, but it is higher than average. You'll see here there's not a lot of volume being traded on average overnight, and then we have a lot of activity here. And I'm not sure if this is, I don't think this is earnings. Let me just make sure the corporate actions are added to my chart here. Yeah, so this doesn't appear to be earnings. It's just a breakout. Maybe there's some news, maybe not, but in either case, it is breaking out, and so that is, a potential momentum trade for the day. So I've dragged that up to my focus list. And so here is this is not as interesting to me. It is strong. It's breaking out of this basing area here, but it's breaking into this resistance up here. So it's kind of just so-so. It is already kind of a strong looking situation. It's coming from a downtrend. It looks like it's trying to start reversing that downtrend on the daily chart here. We had a nice gap up, and we've been kind of adjusting to that big gap and that huge volume day that happened right here. And now we're trying to see if we can get back up above that and start a new uptrend. This one again is just not as interesting because it's up into this, I guess it would be considered minor resistance. So I'm going to pass on that one. Yeah, and also that Selge that I just looked at, it just doesn't have a lot of high overnight volume going on here. You'll see here I have a couple of columns added: relative overnight volume, tick count, relative aftermarket tick count, and relative pre-market tick count. And so those are just, around 50%, 40% of the average. So that's not really saying, okay, there's a lot of eyeballs on this stock right now. That's not really telling me that there's a lot of interest in this stock. So it's not a great gap, and it's not got a lot of interest, so I'm not really interested either. Not currently. It maybe later in the day it will start looking better. This one had a nice breakout day yesterday, and it's just this would be kind of like a day two. It's got some holdover activity from yesterday's strong day. But so we had some high relative aftermarket, pre-market, and overnight are just kind of so-so, and I'm not sure that I see anything I could do. On a breakout over this level, it's getting a little bit better, but it's still not breaking out over this pivot, so that's not something I'm super interested in. RDSA and B are going to be pretty much the same, so I'm not going to look at both of those. So this one's breaking out of several pivots here, and that's a little interesting. We got still some resistance overhead, but this could be interesting today, so I'll go ahead and add that to my list. It does have some higher than average overnight and aftermarket ticks, and the pre-market though is just so right now. It is still pretty early in the day though, so that maybe that's acceptable. Let's see here, Dollar Tree gapping down. Let me zoom in a little bit better here. So we're gapping pretty far down here, it looks like. Oh no, there we go. Okay, I had to free up my mouse there. Well, I don't see that as a really interesting gap because it's not breaking any really big levels, and but it could be interesting down into this level here. You're probably going to expect a bounce around this 100 level where there was some resistance originally. Gapping down just above that, might trade down into it and then find a bounce there. But personally, right now, I only trade on the long side anyway, so that's not one I'm going to be interested in personally, but that's a potential trade for you short traders out there. This one gapping down to the bottom of a pivot. If it breaks that pivot, that can be good, but you're going to have some some struggles along the way getting to these various other levels. That's Johnson and Johnson. I really just look for the super obvious, like super easy. Okay, this is breaking out. There's no levels nearby. Got a huge void on the price chart. It's easy movement is to be expected. That kind of thing. Why make it hard on myself if I don't have to? If there's good stocks to trade um, that don't have a lot of potential resistance, coming in nearby, then I'm just going to ignore the ones that have a lot of that garbage on the chart. So this one's gapping down kind of into no man's land. It's just kind of in the middle of something there. And we got another gap down here that's pretty big. This one looks like an earnings gap, gapping down into this pivot area here. And so, yeah, that's trapped a lot of traders. Pretty big shock coming down into this area where there's been some high volume in the past. So this will probably find some support here for a while and then maybe break. So on this kind, you might play just an initial thrust down and then expect it to bounce back up. But you never know. You'll have to wait and see. But anyway, so that's kind of what I look for on the gaps. So that's my gap list for the day. It's scanning within this overall list. Now what I like to do is just look for high pre-market volume. And then some of the things that I look for later will be stocks with a high relative opening range. A opening range in the first 30 minutes or 15 minutes even, that's a lot stronger than normal. So compared to its normal opening range. So I've made a little column that looks for that and sorts the list by the relative opening range, and that helps me find some strong candidates that happened after the open. But anyway, so let's go through this real quick. This is doing a pullback, nothing there. This one, First Solar breaking out. Could be breaking above this pivot here. It's pretty extended right now, so that's not something I'm probably going to trade, but I'll keep it on my watch list. I already looked at GIS, ABC. Not a lot of activity there. I think that's looking at yesterday's still. Yesterday's pre-market still, because I don't think the pre-market started on this one yet. Nothing there, nothing there. Not a lot of activity in the pre-markets on these. I think I'm going to switch. I think I'm still too early, so I'm going to switch to the relative overnight ticks instead of pre-market. And so I'm going to remove that one real quick. And I'm also going to add my column for relative opening range on the 30 and just show you what that looks like. Space these out a little bit better here. So let me sort this again by relative overnight. Okay, Dollar General, we looked at that one. TJX, strong. It broke out just a tiny bit yesterday, and so today could get some follow through, but it is up into this level in here. So it may or may not be strong today. It's already had 3 or 4 days up here, so we'll see. I'll probably wait on that one till after the open and see how it behaves. This one's gapping out of levels here. We've got some supply up in here, but it's gapping over these pivots, so that's probably a pretty decent play. There's not a huge amount of volume, so I don't like that. Oh, this is one I already looked at. Yeah, okay, this is GIS. Okay, M, nothing there for me. I really want to see stocks that are potentially going to break levels, nearby levels during the day. So we already looked at Dow and COG, PVF, nothing there. So this one is just kind of basing, so yeah, not really interested in that. You can have a lot of buy setups in a base that just end up failing and reverting back to the mean. So this is putting in a low pivot here, trying to pivot back up in this demand area. And that's interesting for some longer term traders, but not for me today. Yeah, and I think I'm pretty early today, so it's just not got a lot of activity going on yet. And so I'm going to repeat this process a little closer to the open, but so that's the overnight ticks. So I look for, especially the ones that are in the yellow. That means they're above, I think, 250% of their average overnight tick count. And then anything above 200, I think I have. I can't remember how I have this specified, but oh no, there's what it is. It's 500. Above 500 is yellow, 500% of the average. I think above 200% is blue, and then above 100% or 150 is this white color, and then light gray and dark gray and so forth. So I just have it, a little bit color coded there in the different percentage levels, so the ones that are really important kind of stick out. And then, so later in the day at the open, I will start looking at the relative opening range. And so you can see here, this color code's based on the, a really unusually strong opening ranges. So you can see that, so this is still based on yesterday because the market's not open yet, but you can see this was a opening range that's higher than average. Strong opening range there. Strong opening range here, and so forth. So I kind of look for that. Sometimes these, it's not foolproof, so sometimes these are a little bit, not something that I would be interested in trading, but a lot of times you'll find that this works pretty well at finding some strong opening drive setups that you can find little pullbacks in here that will work in your favor. So these are all the opening range plays, and you can see a lot of these really did trend well. This one was a high of day close essentially. So this one had a nice pullback in there on the smaller time frame. It had a deep pullback on the 30 and 1 hour. So maybe that would have been playable, maybe not. Anyway, so that's kind of, I always look at these relative values, relative opening range, relative overnight tick count, relative overnight volume, that kind of thing. I like to look at a stock relative to what it usually does itself, instead of, percentage basis or, I prefer not to look at the percentage basis because, a stock could, like on this marked percent change, well, you don't know, it might be, 2%, 3%, but it might have only had just a random spike during the day that doesn't really indicate that it has trended well through the day. So I look for those opening ranges to indicate that, okay, this might trend later in the day because we had a nice, trend spike in the early morning. That's one thing to look for. Another thing I look at is this count above the MA. And this will start working a little better later as the market opens. But essentially what it does, it counts up on the 2-minute chart how many 2-minute closes are above a certain moving average, and versus how many bars have actually closed during the day at all. And so 100% means all the bars are above the moving average. And so that means that it's generally trended well. Now this is based on today's pre-market right now. So all the closes during today's pre-market have been above the moving average. So that's at 100% currently. Some of these that don't have a pre-market yet might show what it looks like on the prior day price action here. Let's see if I can show you that. Let's see if I can find a stock that doesn't have any pre-market. I was finding a lot of them a minute ago. Anyway, I find this, it's not really, not really cooperating right now. But yeah, so that's one measure that I look for instead of just looking at percent change during the day, which most people do. So some of these are 3%, 2%, 1%, whatever. But those don't really tell you if the stock is trending. It just tells you that there's been a crazy spike up to a certain level, perhaps, or something like that, or that it could be trending. So you have to sift through them all manually. And so I try to avoid that by just saying, okay, well, what's a quick, easy way of identifying a trend? Well, if all the closes or the majority of the closes are above a moving average, that's probably trending upward. So, it's a pretty obvious thing to do. And so I just look at percent of closes on the day that are above the moving average. And you can use whatever moving average you want. It kind of doesn't really matter that much. I use a 20, I think a 20 exponential, but that just it just gives it a reference point to say, okay, are we, generally moving up on average for the day? And so anyway, I'm not going to be able to show what that looks like, unfortunately, because it's not cooperating with me right now. I'm not finding any that don't have a pre-market, so we could look at yesterday's price action. But anyway, so that's one other way that I look for trendy stocks after the open. If this is above 60%, it colors gray. Above 75, it colors dark green. I think above 85, it starts coloring light green. And so that's how that works. The other thing I look at is the close above or below. And so I'm just looking at the daily close. Is it breaking above a certain number of prior highs or lows? So if it's light green, it means the close is above the highest high in the past X number of bars. If it's dark green, it just means the high is above the highest high in the last X number of bars, but it closed back within. And black means it's within the prior price action. Dark red, of course, just means it's the low is below the lowest low in the last X number of bars, and light red means the close actually closed below. And I can show you what that. So this close is below the last 3 bars. I think I have it set to 3 bars right now. So it's closed below the low of these last 3 lows. And here's another example of one that closed below the last 3 lows, and so forth. So those are just ways of finding stocks that have broken out of their daily level. Maybe the prior day's low, you can set it to 1 day and have it look for just a breakout of yesterday's levels, or you can set it to multiple days, like the whole week, 5 days, whatever you want to set it to, and it'll look for that. So that's just another method. I don't use that one as much because usually I have enough setups based on the other methods that I don't have to look at this. But you can see, so these are breakouts with a close above the last 3 highs. Yeah, so that was a nice one there. Nice base breakout. See if I can find that again. That's the kind that I really like to find. So here's a nice little base breakout here. It closed above the highs of all these past 3 candles. Here was a close above these pivots here. We're also above this. So that's kind of a nice little setup right there. So those are some methods that I look for. And then in the day, during the trading day, I will keep this list, add some columns here for the trend count, count above the moving average. I'll look at max percent change from open instead of just the max percent change from yesterday's close. I have a percent change from open column here that tells me how much We've actually changed from the open, and that's just another way of finding a higher quality trend. Um, if it's a huge change from the yesterday's close, that might be just a gap that hasn't moved anywhere. So it might gap up and then just stay where it is, where it opens. And so that kind of sometimes means that it's not trending as well. So change from open can tell you a little bit better that the stock is trending perhaps. It doesn't, it's not foolproof. That's the reason I use the count above the moving average sometimes instead. But this helps, sort by the ones that are the strongest for the day, and then um, and then I can sort by the strongest according to the moving average as well. So anyway, that's another tip for you. I have a percent change from open that's available on my website. The relative volume, that's all available on my website too. Um, I don't have several of these. I don't actually have released yet. I just dabble around with some of these things and use them on my own before I release them on my site or anything. So I like to find things that I find useful and then share those with the people that my customers on my website. So that's how I approach it. But anyway, so that's what I do. I'll build this list and then just kind of keep going through it throughout the day until I find the setups that I look for and go from there. So hopefully this has been helpful. I know this has been a little bit long, but I wanted to show you some methods for finding movers in the morning and sorting those by the highest quality. And so I hope this has been useful, and we will talk to you tomorrow.